All right, I think we are definitely. I'm pretty sure we're live now. Let me double check everything. Yeah, we're live now, Connor. Oh,
Yeah, I
wait.
can see we're on air right now.
You can see us on YouTube.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
I can see
There
that
we
we're
are.
on air.
Yeah.
I'm afraid if I go to YouTube, it's
Yeah, no.
lag.
That's okay. Yeah, so it looks like it's working on YouTube. So let's just go ahead and let's do like a little test run here. And what should we start with? What do you want to start with? I know you had a couple things, conference championship predictions. We had breakthrough surprise teams, Heisman, season win totals. Should we just start at the conference championship predictions?
Yeah, we can start with that, and if you want, um, we can separate the different topics into different videos, so we can have like 5 or 10 minute video on conference championship predictions,
Yeah.
another video on win totals. That way, we're not like crunching everything into like a 30 minute or an hour long video. If that's okay with you.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, that's how we'll do it. Just for like everything, any videos from here on out, we'll cut them up and then have them different videos on YouTube. So yeah. So the first one that I have written down is conference championship prediction for the American Athletic Conference. I'll go ahead and let you start and kick us off.
I think it'll be UTSA against Tulane. Uh, I would not be shocked if Memphis and SMU had impressive win totals,
Mm-hmm.
but I trust UTSA and Tulane the most. This season has a last ride kind of feel to it for UTSA. Frank Harris is a seventh year senior, one of the few seventh year seniors left in college football. They got a really good receiving core. I know they lost one of their best receivers to Ole Miss, but that's still a really good receiving core. In fact, I think they had at least two first team all AAC pass catchers.
Yeah, the Corian Clark and Josh Cephas.
Yeah, and in fact, I think their tight end might even been.
Yeah, I think he may have been like second team. I don't think he's a first teamer. Oscar Cardenas, I don't think he's a first teamer, but we'll have to look that up. But I'm pretty sure he was nominated or at least named like a second or third team. But I don't know about first team though. I know they had a lot of them. UTSA.
But it's still probably the best receiving core, not just in the AAC. I think it's one of the best receiving cores in the entire G5 for this year.
Yeah.
Despite losing Zachary Franklin.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And I like their offensive line. Last year they dealt with some injuries, so that because of the injury situation last year, they have more depth this year. They got probably 8 or 9 guys that they can throw into the fire. It's not a great offensive line, but it's good enough. Defensively, it should be much improved this year. They bring back about 8 starters. Last year was a little bit of a down year for them defensively, at least compared to 2021. But they should improve on their defensive numbers this year. I like their pass rush this year. I think they'll be able to get pressure on opposing quarterbacks. I don't love the secondary, but I think it'll be fine. I love the front seven, though. And so it'll start up front for UTSA defensively and offensively. I love the skill position, and I think the run game will be really good this year too. Again, because of what the injury situation was up front last year, so they have more tested depth there.
Yeah.
I trust UTSA to get to the AAC championship in their first year in the American Athletic, and then I trust Tulane a lot. I love their coach. I think Willie Smith is one of the best G5 coaches in the country. He's been really good for years for Tulane, and he finally had a breakthrough season last year. They were really close in 2019.
They finally found a quarterback. They finally got some quarterbacks because Willie Fritz, he's a run-heavy coach. So I think he kind of switched up the offense there the past couple seasons. They started throwing the ball, and that really opened up their offense. So that helped a lot as well.
Yeah, in 2019 they had that McMillan guy who was a transfer from North Carolina. He was originally at LSU, went to North Carolina, then he went to Tulane for his last year. He had a really good receiving core with a couple of guys who are now in the NFL that season. But remember that year the AAC was crazy good. Like Memphis, Temple was good back then. SMU was really good.
Yeah, Houston.
Houston was really good back then. UCF.
Yeah.
Cincinnati was really good that year too. So it was just loaded, and so Tulane was like best of the rest, but they were still pretty competitive that year.
Yeah.
And that was at that point they had a really good power rating, but their record didn't show for it because that's how good the AAC was that year. But that was Tulane's best team that they had in years.
Mm-hmm.
And so Willie Fritz he had a lot to do with it, and really he's been bringing in really good transfers for multiple years now, and they all put it together. And like you mentioned, they finally had a quarterback that was consistent in Michael Pratt. Pratt is back. I do have some questions in just regards to the overall athleticism of this year's team. I think they're going to be very physical on the offensive and defensive lines. They bring back most of their experience up front on both sides of the football, but I do have some questions in the skill positions, particularly the wide receivers, and then a little bit in the secondary, but really more so at linebacker. I'm not really worried that they're going to get guys who are going to be tackling machines in the middle. They always have a guy there that racks up a lot of stats. I just don't know if they're going to be like last year's speed. They were really fast last year, and they were fast at wide receiver as well. Obviously, they had a really good running back. So I just don't think they're going to be quite as talented. So I would not be surprised to see Tulane go like 9-3, maybe 10-2. But even this new look American Athletic, I do think it's kind of top heavy, and then the bottom. There's a bottom for sure.
Yeah.
So I think teams like Memphis and SMU, like in that article that I wrote, and then Tulane and UTSA are going to benefit from that. And I trust Tulane and UTSA to find ways to be the most consistent of that top group. And so that's why I think they'll play in the American Athletic Conference Championship.
Yeah, and UTSA, they have, I think it's a pretty winnable schedule. They finished the season with Tulane, don't they? I think they played Tulane maybe the last game of the season.
They play at Tulane. Yep.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I think that they have a good year. Like you said, SMU, their schedule lines up as well, and they should have a good team. I don't think they're at the same level as UTSA and Tulane. Same thing with Memphis. Memphis has a good quarterback, sophomore quarterback. He should be. I mean, they should be improved from last year, Memphis. But I don't know. I think they're going to be in that second tier category in the American, and UTSA is definitely at the very top. Frank Harris leading the way, and then Tulane right behind them. So I agree with you there. I had written down right here UTSA as the American Athletic Conference champions.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance with the way their schedules work. UTSA loses at Tulane that regular season finale, but then they match up again in the conference championship, and then UTSA wins that.
Is that a road game for UTSA? I believe, or
yes, I believe so.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought.
And we'll get into win totals in a separate video, but there's a reason why UTSA's preseason win total in most sports books is at 7.5, and I still think it's low, but there's a reason why it's at that number.
Yeah, we talked about that, and we'll get into that later. Especially in the magazine, anybody could check out the magazine for free on the website. Just check our links, but yeah, no, that was definitely a low number. Whenever you told me it was 7.5, I was kind of surprised at that as well. Let's see here. We have the ACC conference. Who do you have win the ACC this year?
Well, it's going to be between Florida State and Clemson.
Yeah.
I guess for the championship game, I'll go Florida State, just because I think it'll be their second time facing each other this coming fall. And a theory that I use for just about any situation like this, whenever you have two really good teams playing each other in the same season more than once, I will not pick the same team to win both times. I'll pick either team in either matchup, and a lot of it will have to do with where do they play in their regular season game, and then I'll pick the other team in the postseason or whenever that next game might be.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because they're playing at Clemson in the regular season, I'll say Clemson wins in the regular season matchup.
Mm-hmm.
They'll face each other again in the ACC championship, and then I'll have Florida State winning that.
Okay.
I can see it vice versa as well, but there was an interesting stat that came out earlier today talking about how Mike Norvell has never had like a top 20 or 25 win on the road before.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that last night. Yeah.
But I do trust Mike Norvell. So 4 years ago, my number one G5 team going into the season was Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because I loved what the roster they had, but I also trusted their coaching staff and Mike Norvell.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now this year we see Florida State. They've got a lot coming back. There's a lot of potential with this team. Obviously, they've been hyped up probably more than any team in the country for this year. And I trust Mike Norvell, so I don't think Florida State's going to disappoint this year in terms of like 8-4 kind of record. I don't think we're going to see that from them now. Whether or not they're 9-3, 10-2, 11-1, that'll be an interesting thing to watch for, because I do think they kind of beat up on some lower tier teams towards the second half of last year, and then we saw them barely beat Oklahoma. Oklahoma's another interesting story himself, but I'm not sure how like great Florida State is, or how about this? I'm not sure if they're elite, but at the floor scenario, I think they're a great team.
Well, what's their season win total? It's like 9.5, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 9.5.
That's what I thought, and it's juiced to the over as well. At least the last time I saw it, which was a couple weeks ago, I'm pretty sure it was maybe minus $1.40 for it to go over 9.5 wins, which would mean they pretty much only have 2 losses. I think 3 losses.
If they hit the over, they'll only have 2 or less losses.
Yeah. Which would be, let's just say Clemson, and then LSU, Florida, which I don't think, but it would be LSU. I think we'll learn a lot more about Florida State at the beginning of the season, after the LSU game. But I mean, after last year, because the past couple of nights I've been watching, I would say I watched the Florida State LSU game. I rewatched it. I rewatched Florida State Wake Forest, Florida State Clemson, and I think that they kind of they didn't fall apart, but they didn't live up to those expectations after beating LSU. And now this year, I think those expectations are at least multiplied by 2 for them to, like we talked about, win the ACC, pressure on Jordan Travis, Heisman, NFL. Same thing with Verse on the defensive side. Mike Norvell, pressures on him at Florida State, because what is this, year number 4 or 5 maybe?
4. Yeah.
Year 4. Yeah. So this is like that pressure season for the staff and the team. So I have Florida State winning the ACC. I think they'll probably lose to Clemson because they play Clemson on the road. I don't have their schedule in front of me, but I think that would be probably where they may slip up. But they'll have to go and play some road games, and we'll see how they do. But I'm really looking forward to the first game of the season, Florida State and LSU. I think Florida State will win, but again, it's how they're going to finish the season. Because expectations were high after they beat LSU last year, and then they kind of faltered in some games they shouldn't have lost. I also watched the Florida State North Carolina State game. That was the other one I saw. But yeah, I'm with you. Hopefully we see a Florida State and Clemson matchup. I don't think Drake May is a great quarterback for North Carolina, but I don't think that North Carolina as a team will have enough to make it to an ACC championship. But we'll see. And I don't think there's any other teams that are looking that promising coming out of the ACC this year. I can't hear you. Oh, did your AirPods die? Oh, okay. Well, I mean, we could stop it there, and we could see if it at least the video worked, because I have no idea if it's working or not on YouTube. So if you want, then we could do that. That's fine. I can't hear you if that's what you asked.
You can't hear me right now?
Oh, I can hear you now. I can hear you now.
Okay, awesome.
Oh, did you just use your other AirPod?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
This one's been messing up a lot recently, so
Oh.
sometimes.
I
it's
see.
fully charged, so.
Yeah, it's working at least. It sounds just like the other one, so not too bad. But I don't know if you heard me, but do you think I don't really think there's any other ACC schools that could really vie for that conference championship? Miami, not great. North Carolina, they have Drake May, but what else do they really have? What do you think? Anybody else that may sneak up on Florida State and Clemson?
By the end of the season, it's going to be Florida State and Clemson in the ACC championship. So I'm not going to try to play devil's advocate here and try to figure out a path for another team to play potentially in the ACC championship. It's not going to happen. But in terms of like what team could still surprise maybe to a degree, hit their over in the win total potentially, Louisville has a really manageable schedule this year. They did a really good job in the portal. Got Jeff Brom coming in.
Yeah.
Jeff Brom's a really good coach. So last year, all of my followers on my college football page remember that I was a huge fan of Purdue last year. And a lot of that had to do with I thought they had an undervalued roster. I thought they had some sneaky good talent, despite losing the two best players from the previous year. But I also thought and still think that Jeff Brom is a really good coach, and he gets the most out of a roster. So I think Louisville could be like sneaky good. The problem there is that they're relying on a bunch of transfers. They don't really have much depth behind their first string at each position, and so one or two injuries, and it's an average team compared to a pretty good team with a manageable schedule. They're very high variance, and North Carolina is very high variance. I made a post on my Instagram page about a month ago. Over 50% of Mac Brown's games so far in Chapel Hill, and he's been there for this will be his fifth year this fall, and over 50% of his games in Chapel Hill have been decided by one score, whether winning or losing.
Oh, really?
North Carolina is always a very high variance team, and honestly, they do have some talent on defense, but they never live up to their potential. And they're saying, the coaching staff is saying once again that, this will be the year where we turn things around. We're going to get more pressure on opposing quarterbacks. I do think they're going to be able to get pressure on Spencer Rattler in week one because I don't like South Carolina's offensive line. I think the Gamecocks are in trouble. That's another conversation we can have later in this episode maybe. But
I just to touch on that, I agree, and I think the spread on that game is like 2, maybe 3 points to North Carolina's favor.
Yes, you're right, and
I was kind of surprised to see that, even though it's a neutral game. But what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say that's a very appropriate line put out by the market. I would have North Carolina favored as well, but I would tell you this: I would not take North Carolina to cover the spread. I would take the money line, and I know that sounds silly because it's like, well, if they're only favored by 2 or 3, then how can they win and not cover? I mean, there's so many scenarios that they can do that. Well, trust me, it's just Mac Brown. They find ways to keep games close when they shouldn't be, whether on the positive or negative side. And South Carolina is the same thing. South Carolina has overachieved in the first 2 years of Shane Beamer. And
Beamer ball.
Yeah, it's Beamer ball. They do. Now, I will say this, though. South Carolina is tremendous on special teams. And that's because you have a lot of teams who just kind of relax on special teams. They don't take it seriously. And we saw it in the bowl game against Notre Dame. South Carolina should have never been in that game. They had a chance to win, but they should have not had a chance to win, much less be within 14, 17 points of the Irish.
Yeah.
But special teams, they had a couple turnovers that went their way. So those little things South Carolina does do well, but they're going to be beat up at the line of scrimmage this year. So I guess this is my transition into South Carolina and the SEC. I don't trust South Carolina this year one bit. Like, a lot of sports books opened up with their win total at 6 or 6.5, and a lot of people were hammering that over. There's a reason why the market had it placed there.
Yeah.
I know it's tempting to take it, especially at plus to money on the over, but again, the market is trying to catch you there. They're trying to get you.
Little trap set. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't trust the Gamecocks this year one bit. I think it's one of the 4 or 5 most difficult schedules in the country. I think they're going to get off to a rough start this year. Now, if they beat North Carolina, then they'll probably go like 7-5. If they lose to North Carolina, then the bottom might fall out, because I think Mississippi State actually has a good chance of going into South Carolina and winning in September. I do not see South Carolina beating Tennessee on the road. I don't see them beating Georgia. I think I think South Carolina will beat Florida, but that's a think.
Is that a home game for South Carolina?
It is.
It is?
It's
Okay.
off a bye week. And after that, they'll have to play at Missouri. And I'll give my thoughts on Missouri here in a second. They'll have to play at Texas A&M. A&M should have beat South Carolina last year. Remember, there was some turnovers early in that game.
Yeah, I think they had like two kickoff returns for a touchdown or 2 pick sixes. They had a bunch of plays like that, like a block punt maybe. But I remember the kick return for a touchdown. I think that was like on the first to start the game, if I remember right.
Yep, it was a kickoff return to start the game. And then A&M had 2 turnovers deep in their territory, and South Carolina had 10 points off of that. So it's 17-0, and we're about halfway through the first quarter, and South Carolina is not done anything offensively. That's what South Carolina does. It's like they win in the margins. They don't really necessarily beat you between the 20s. They win in the margins. They win on special teams. And so that's how they've been able to overachieve the last couple of years. Well, that's not sustainable on a year-to-year basis. Now,
not in the SEC.
No, especially not in the SEC. It's Beamer ball, so I guess you never want to count them out, but I just don't see it with them this year.
Yeah.
Now, I will say this, though, one thing that'll be noteworthy for South Carolina, again, it does kind of hinge on that North Carolina game, but if they lose to North Carolina, and I trust Drake May more than I do Spencer Rattler, and I definitely trust North Carolina's offensive line more. If South Carolina loses to the Tar Heels and they lose to either Mississippi State or Florida at home, and I think that's a very good possibility to lose one of those games, it's going to be an uphill battle to just get to a bowl game, because while South Carolina does have they have a really interesting November schedule, because all 4 games are at home, but 2 of them are against teams who have had their number, at least outside of last year, I guess, with Kentucky and with Clemson. Clemson should have beat South Carolina last year, and the only reason why South Carolina beat Kentucky was because Kentucky didn't have
Levis. Yeah, he didn't play. I remember that.
So that's another game where South Carolina kind of got fortunate. So I think South Carolina is due for some regression this year.
Yeah. No, I agree. I don't think, usually when a team has a sort of season like that, games where, the fortune hits almost weekly, it usually turns around the other way the following season. So I'm with you, but I'm ready to see the South Carolina North Carolina game. Though. It should be a good game, but we'll see. Like you said, you never know. Just the main thing is, North Carolina's got Drake May, and odds on for them to win the game. But let's go back to the next conference. The next conference is the Big 12. Who do you think, or who do you have winning the Big 12 this season?
Well, I'll put it this way: if Texas does not win the conference this year, I mean, when are they ever going to win a conference?
I agree. It sets up perfectly for them this year.
It does. In fact, while we're on that subject, I saw tons of comments after the preseason media poll came out for the Big 12 and had Texas first, and people were like, "What is up with the Texas hype again? They never live up to this expectation. It's every year." Well, actually, play a role of devil's advocate here, Texas has not been first in the preseason Big 12 media poll since 2009, and then of course we know what happened that year. So they have not been in this position technically in the preseason for a long time. The last time they won the Big 12, played in the national championship, and likely would have won it had Colt McCoy not gotten hurt. So
yeah, that game changed the entire history. Not the entire history, but the entire landscape of college football, right? Because after that game, that was the beginning of the Nick Saban run, and Texas went the opposite direction. So that was like that was like a huge shift in college football. Was that Colt McCoy injury in that national championship game that we got cheated out of? That would have been like a really great game. Probably the best two teams all season, Alabama, Texas. They were going to meet up, and yeah, we got cheated out of that. But I agree with you on. It sets up perfectly for Texas. If they don't do it this year, then like you said, when are they going to do it?
I do have my thoughts about if Texas does their usual thing over the last several years and disappoints. I see two other teams outside of Texas being in Big 12 contention for the championship. And that's Oklahoma because their schedule is just so manageable. I wrote that article about them a few months ago.
Yep.
It's the most manageable schedule, I think, in the Power 5. Not in respect to Oklahoma's roster, more in respect to their competition. See, that I'm kind of basing Oklahoma off of what their opponents are not, rather than what Oklahoma is, and so that does concern me a little bit because there are certainly some questions about Oklahoma this year. I mean, every year we go into a season knowing Oklahoma's going to have a really good receiving corps. I don't think we know that this year. I think we know what to expect out of Dylan Gabriel, and I think he's a really good college quarterback. I don't really think he's anything better than that, but he's certainly above good. He's certainly better than good. I don't know if he's elite, though, but the receiving corps for Oklahoma is nothing special this year. Like, Drake Stoops might be their top guy.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, and nothing against Stoops.
No, but I mean he's not like a NFL wide receiver, So yeah. Well, he's not an NFL number one receiver, is what I mean, right?
Right. He's not like that alpha guy that you need. So I don't see many difference makers for Oklahoma this year, at least not offensively. So interestingly enough, I think the offense statistically will probably be better than the defense, but I think there are more dudes on defense than there are on offense. I just don't think as a collective unit the defense will be that great. They got that transfer from Indiana, that defensive end and outside linebacker. He's really good. He's a legit player. He's going to be drafted. I don't know if he'll be eligible next April or if it'll be the following April, but he's really good. They got a transfer from Oklahoma State that'll be one of their other defensive ends. I like the linebackers and defensive ends and safeties for Oklahoma. I do not like the defensive tackle room. They're undersized. They don't have a ton of known entities there. And then the corners are going to be really young this year. A lot of unknowns there. Just because there are unknowns at a particular position doesn't mean it's a weakness, but it's a huge question. And so certainly a question coming into the season is likely not going to be a strength.
Okay.
So for Oklahoma, for me, it's more about what their opponents are not, again, rather than what Oklahoma is. But you got to like Oklahoma's chances of winning at least 9, if not maybe 10 regular season games this year. So
What was the because I don't think that was an official play, but we had talked about it pretty much all summer, and that was the Oklahoma win total. What was that number?
Well, so the one that I discussed with you a few months ago was on FanDuel, and at the time it was like at 8.5, and it was heavily juiced to the over. I think it was the most juiced win total at the time. It was like -2 something.
Yeah, it was like 240, or at least it was definitely over 200, which I think that was a nine flat, maybe 9 wins flat, or
It was 8.5 at the time.
oh.
And I remember saying to you at the time, I'm like, I don't know why this number is not 9. And as not too long after I wrote that article, that's when FanDuel not only increased that win total to 9, it went up to 9.5. And so now at every single sports book, I think
9.5. Okay.
9.5 for Oklahoma. That's not a number that I want to bet on, but
yeah, no.
Oklahoma's certainly a team to watch out for this year. You remember, 5 of their 7 losses last season were by 1 possession, and now their schedule is going to be a lot more easy. You know, they avoid Kansas State, Baylor, and Texas Tech. That's extremely noteworthy. And basically all of the toughest teams that Oklahoma plays this year in conference play outside of Texas are all going to have to go to Norman. So
yeah, I'm looking at their schedule. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's manageable. It's a very manageable schedule. I mean, the Texas game obviously sticks out, and that's a rivalry. So anything can happen in a rivalry. And if they win that game, my goodness, it's like, when are they going to lose? It'll fully flip.
Yeah. So they start off the season pretty easy. Arkansas State, SMU, which they play SMU at home. So not that SMU is what would you say? An easy game, right? They're not like a walkover team. But, you know, they're going to be playing in Norman. More than likely, probably be an 11 a.m. game. So it's going to be tough for SMU no matter what. And then they play at Tulsa. Tulsa's new regime, new everything. So they should take care of business, no problem. At Cincinnati, same thing. A lot of new players, new coach. New coach that I'm not a fan of. I don't think he's great. And we'll talk about that next time when we go over the season win totals that we have in the magazine, because I do have Cincinnati under on there. And then they get Iowa State at home, which luckily for them is a home game because that's right before the UT game. And then they have a bye after the Red River. And then they get UCF at home. Again, UCF should have a decent team, but it's in Norman. And then this is when their schedule finally gets a little difficult, which they got to go to Kansas, and then to Oklahoma State, Stillwater, West Virginia at home. Then they have to go to BYU, and then home against TCU, which, again, they have a very favorable schedule, especially at home. They could get tripped up. Oklahoma State, Stillwater, Bedlam game, and then maybe even against BYU. Depends how BYU shakes out this season. But and Provo, OU, first time going to Provo, as for BYU being in the Big 12. So I would imagine that they make that a night game. I could see that being a night game, and possible place where OU slips up. So maybe they have 2 losses, and that's being, let's see here, 2. I mean, I don't think Kansas beats them, but it's a possibility. They kept up with them last year, but most of that was a come from behind win. Kansas's run defense couldn't do anything. And then the UT game. So yeah. So whoever wins the Red River, it might be one of those years. And how appropriate would that be for OU and Texas's last year in the Big 12? That probably whoever wins the Red River rivalry will probably at least play in the Big 12 championship, and it might even be a rematch again. So it wouldn't surprise me if that's the type of Big 12 send-off they get, is the OU-UT rematch in the Big 12 championship.
And if it's not one of those, if it's not both of those teams playing in the Big 12 championship, I think Texas Tech.
No, that's right. You're very high on Texas Tech this year with this $26 million man.
Yeah, and I think they're the second most talented team in the Big 12 this year after Texas. but their schedule is a lot more difficult than Oklahoma's is, and they have a lot less room for error than both Texas and Oklahoma have. I wish they played Oklahoma in the regular season because they could potentially get that tiebreaker because I think Texas Tech would beat OU this year.
Ooh, this Tech schedule is pretty rough.
It is pretty rough, but I'll say this: it's noteworthy that most of the top teams that they have to play on their schedule outside of Texas are going to Lubbock. One of them is a non-conference game against the Ducks. Tyler Shucks, the starting quarterback for Texas Tech. That's his former team with Oregon.
What was he? He started at Oregon? That I didn't know. I know he didn't play.
He played a good bit.
What year is that? Because Bo Nix started for 4 years. I know Shuck's been in college for like 7, but Bo Nix started for 4 years. So when did Shuck play at Oregon? What year is that?
Auburn.
Who am I? I'm thinking of Justin Herbert. My bad.
Yeah.
Herbert. So this had to be right after Justin Herbert? Because Herbert played 4 years, and he played all 4 years.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. Not Nix. I meant Justin Herbert. My bad.
But Tech's schedule is difficult, but it is noteworthy that the top teams, again, most of the top teams that they have to play on their schedule, Oregon, Kansas State, TCU, they all got to go to Lubbock. And I'll say this too. I don't think TCU and Kansas State are all that great this year. You're going to have a lot of people probably put them in their top 3 to 4 teams in the Big 12 for this year. I definitely think there's an upper echelon in the Big 12, probably a top 6 to 7, and I do think TCU and Kansas State are obviously in the top 5 to 6, but I just don't see it with those two teams going into Lubbock and winning this year. I think Tech's really good. I'll have a little bit more of a preview on Tech. Honestly, I could have a 20-minute conversation about Texas Tech.
Yeah, we may have to do that Saturday. Get you rambling on Texas Tech. I'm sure the 806 would love that. So we may have to do that then.
They are a very good team. And this is not just because they're a senior-laden team, and that's going to help them in close games, having a senior-laden group. But it's more than that to me. I think they got some dudes. And I guess a little bit of a sneak preview into our however long of an episode we have on Tech. Bruce Feldman came out with his athletic freaks list a few days ago, and Texas Tech's defense had 3 on that list.
3 of them?
About Texas Tech. Yeah, they had 3 on that athletics freaks list.
They also had a first-round draft pick. They also had a first-round draft pick this summer.
Yeah, and that's what the preview magazines are saying. They're like, they lose Tari Wilson, they're going to have a drop-off defensively. Nope, I think they're going to be better than they were last year.
Yeah, well, the only preview magazine that matters is ours, and we made sure and brought that up, that's for sure.
Right? See, we have too many casuals that are giving their take on teams. And
there it is. Exactly. That's why they got to come here and get the real scoop, right?
That's right.
I just want to real quick, because I was looking at their schedule, and it starts off, tough, because they got to go to Laramie, first game of the season, which is, I believe it's one of the last games, second to last games on Saturday, week 1. Not week 0, but week 1. I think this kicks off at 9 or 9:30 Central. In Laramie, and I think that's a tough game because, one, you have the look-ahead spot against Oregon, and they got Oregon at home. So you know that, even though, Jordan McGuire, great coach, great recruiter, but, there's still kids, right? They're pretty young, and they're going to be looking forward to that Oregon game. But they still got to beat Wyoming. And Wyoming, they were, I would say, weak for their standards last season. But that's because they were really young, and this season that team is a little bit aged, and they're going to be able to run the ball and want to run the ball. I think that's going to be a tricky game. I want to say the spread last time I saw was probably like 17 points, 16.5 points. I'll probably be, it's at 14.
Or 14.5, yeah.
Oh wow, yeah, I could be wrong. Let me see when that opened. I I just got to see this now. I just want to see what the opening number was. Texas Tech. Okay, it opened at 14. I was wrong. Maybe I was thinking of a different game. Tech opened as a 14.
Maybe Oregon State at San Jose State. That's a 16.5-point spread.
It might have been. Yeah, I don't know which game I was thinking of. Maybe it might have been that one. Because that's another late game that day. But Texas Tech, and then they play Tarleton, of course, little relaxer, probably a homecoming game. Then they go to West Virginia, which I'm as low as possible on Neil Brown. Yeah, exactly. Especially this year, that could be Neil Brown's last game. That's what, week 1, 2, 3, 4. That could be Neil Brown's last game. We'll see. We'll have a West Virginia pod one of these days because I have to rant about them. But they get Houston at home, but they got to go to Waco against Baylor, Kansas State at home. They got to go to Provo, play BYU, and then they get a bye. TCU at home. They got to play at Kansas, UCF at home, and then they finish the season day after Thanksgiving in Austin against UT. So honestly, that's a compared to Oklahoma, that's a pretty tough schedule. Like, it's not ridiculous, but it's pretty tough, especially when you throw in at Wyoming and then at Oregon, which Oregon's one of the top teams this year. Should be a top team, but yeah, I think that's a tough schedule.
And I guess one other little sneak preview on Tech, because again, I'm going to rant about Texas Tech in a positive way.
Okay, good.
Have tons of compliments for them, but it'll start with their defensive line this year. Like, again, most preview magazines, not ours.
No,
most of them will discuss how they lose Tyree Wilson, the defensive line, the defensive front, the pass rush will probably take a step back. Nope, it's going to be better this year, and it starts with they got Steve Litton, a transfer from Syracuse. He's a little bit undersized, but he's a really good edge rusher.
Mm-hmm.
But the guy that I'm really looking forward to watching this year, I mean, I'm looking forward to watching Steve, but Miles Cole on the opposite side. He's like 6'6", 285. He might even be 290 now.
Mm-hmm.
But this guy, he was one of those 3 athletic freaks that Bruce Feldman talked about in The Athletic. And the athletic freak list by Bruce Feldman's always one of my favorite lists to look at before the season starts. But this was a guy, Miles Cole, was a guy that I talked about in the preview, in our preview. And I cannot wait to watch this guy. And, of course, they bring back their 2 fifth-year senior defensive tackles. This is a really good defensive line for Texas Tech, and I think a little hot take here, I think there's a chance all 4 of them could be drafted in next April.
That's pretty high praise, especially for Texas Tech, which is, it's a good football program, but it's not, like a blue blood that would have 4 linemen drafted in the first round. Or not the first round, but just drafted, period. But, that's still really great. That's and these must not have been McGuire's recruits, right? Because this is year 2 for him. And these guys, they must be juniors or seniors, and this is a senior-laden team. Yeah, okay. So
Steve Linton, I mean, that's technically a McGuire recruit because he's
from Syracuse. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then they got Tyler Owens coming back at one of the safety spots, and he's really talented. He was injured most of last season, so that's a really good return. You got Malik Dunlap at one of the corners. I think the one weakness for Texas Tech, at least in the secondary, is their speed. I mean, Owens is really fast, but the corners are not that fast. But they are physical, they are big, they know how to play the ball. But I think this is a really good – I say really good, and I mean it. I think it's a really good Texas Tech defense. I mean, I guess really good today, statistically, you might give 20 to 24 points a game, but you got some difference makers. You can create some havoc. You force turnovers. That's what a really good defense does today. Elite's on a different level. Not saying they're elite, but I think they're legit, and I think they'll be really good this year.
Yeah, because the Elite, I mean, at least like the past 3 years, that's like a Georgia defense where they have five guys going in the first round in the national championship. That's probably the bar. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it, especially their schedule, because it's definitely not it's not a skip in the park. So they're gonna have to, if they win, they're gonna earn it, and if they could get through that gauntlet of the schedule, then yeah, they could find themselves in the Big 12 championship.
Oh, I think Texas Tech. I think they're good enough to win. I mentioned the 3 home games against Oregon, Kansas State, and TCU. I think they're good enough to win at least 2 of those.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the main thing that I think is because they don't play Oklahoma. So you're right. Like, I think that's going to come into play at the end of the year. So the matchup against Baylor and the Kansas State game, and then obviously the UT game. Those are must wins. Like, they're gonna have to go on the road and beat Baylor and Texas. If they can do that, they'll probably be in the Big 12 championship.
Yeah, and we discussed Oklahoma's schedule, but we really didn't talk about what Oklahoma, is or was, because I don't really love their roster, but it's probably one of those scenarios where you're looking at a team that's probably going to finish with double-digit wins by the end of the postseason at the very least, and that's a kind of team that you would call a hollow double-digit win team, because they're really not that great.
Uh-huh. Yeah, especially with that weak schedule. Do they play Baylor? Don't they, Oklahoma?
No,
they don't play Baylor.
K-State and Texas Tech.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, for them basically it's like UT, Kansas, and I forget that third one that we talked about. But yeah, that's a ridiculously easy schedule. Now, after seeing like the Texas Tech schedule,
yeah,
they lucked out for sure. All right, the next one, the Big Ten. This one I'm very curious because I have one that's I know for a fact that's going to be different than what you have. So go ahead and kick it off.
For me this year, I see it's Michigan against Wisconsin. If it's not Michigan, then it's Ohio State against Wisconsin. The West Division. Last year, I was all on the Purdue train, no pun intended.
Yeah.
But this year, it's like, I don't know. I guess Wisconsin, with their schedule, with their coach. I mean, the West Division, it doesn't matter because they're not going to win when they get to the Big Ten championship. But I guess Wisconsin will definitely have a better season this year. They'll definitely turn things around. They're kind of a high-variance team. We're still in the first couple of years of these transfer portal hauls when teams try to turn things around completely in 1 year. Georgia Southern was able to do it last year with the former Clay Helton.
Yeah.
Southern, who changed the offense from the triple option to the air raid. They were able to do that. And in 1 year, they completely had, and it was a very successful transition.
They started like 6. They started like 6-0, 5-0, 4-0.
Well, I know they beat Nebraska early in the season, but then they lost to Coastal Carolina with.
Was it Coastal?
Like a last-minute touchdown.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's.
Game, but Georgia Southern, nonetheless, was much better than most people thought they were going to be, because most of the people assumed, okay, they got some transfers here, they got some decent players, but it's still going to be an uphill battle because you're totally changing things. It's going to take a little while.
Mm-hmm.
That idea that used to exist just a few years ago in college football, where it's year one for a coach, let him get his guys in there, let him give him some time here, that patience thing, that doesn't exist anymore. Things can totally change in 1 year, and that's what we might be looking at for Wisconsin. But again, Wisconsin has preseason expectations now put by the media and others that, no, they're a New Year's Six team automatically. This will be a team that goes 10-2 and finishes potentially in the top 10 or top 15. It's possible with their schedule, and they are a Big Ten West team, so if they win a few one-score games, then they're going to probably win 10 games. But then you could also find them on the losing side of those close games in the Big Ten West, and the next thing you know, they're 8-4. So
yeah.
I feel confident that they'll get to the Big Ten championship. They won't win it, though. And So I'm guessing you probably have Ohio State from the East Division, but I just feel like this is Michigan's year.
Yeah, with Ohio State, I've been big on Ohio State the past 2 years, and they've let me down against Michigan, and then Ohio State kind of snuck into the college football playoff, but they probably should have beat Georgia. That didn't happen, but that was a great game. But they still lost, and actually, I have Michigan only because of Ohio State. I don't really know about their quarterback, how they're going to look. So that's my main thing. They definitely have the offense. They got Henderson at running back, obviously Abukum and Marvin Harrison Jr. on the outside. So they have the weapons. I just don't know if they have the quarterback. So I imagine it's just a plug in and let it rip with those weapons. But I don't really know. I want Ohio State, but I think Michigan might be able to do it again. They're pretty much going to have the same team, so they'll probably give them fits. And I think it's back at Michigan. No, it's at Ohio State this year, or it's at Michigan.
No, it's at Michigan.
Okay. So
yeah, Michigan did that to Ohio State at Ohio State this past year.
Okay, that's right. Because I was trying to think of the game where it was snowing. And that must have been at Michigan 2 years ago then.
That's right.
Okay. And then I have on the other division I have Wisconsin as well. And I just looked at the Wisconsin schedule, and it's actually kind of difficult. They have some tough road games. Are they impossible? No. But they got to go. They still have to play Washington State on the road, and then they play at Purdue. New coaching staff, home against Rutgers, home against Iowa. Then I have to play at Illinois, which could be tough. It will be tough. Home against Ohio State. They got to go at Indiana. Home against Northwestern, Nebraska, and then at Minnesota. So, but the reason why I'm big or high on Wisconsin is because of the coaching staff, honestly. They bring in Tanner Mordecai, SMU, and then Luke Fickell, and then, of course, my favorite, Phil Longo, in at offensive coordinator. So you know that Barry Alvarez, he's probably, even though Barry Alvarez is, I think he's still the athletic director, I'm pretty sure they're tired of, whoever's in charge, they're probably tired of not having an offense and having a great defense but no offense. So I think they're trying to change it this year, bringing in a spread quarterback, bringing in a spread, quick, fast-paced offensive coordinator in Longo, and see what happens. Hopefully they can get things together, but I don't know if they'll win the Big Ten. But that's who I have, just somebody different than Ohio State or Michigan, because I think that if Wisconsin does put everything together, then they should have a pretty strong season.
Yeah, I don't want to say I'm selling Mordecai, but I don't think I'm buying into Mordecai as much as some are. I don't think he's that great, but again, it's the Big Ten West Division, and so I do not think the Big Ten West Division is going to be all that special this year. Like I honestly thought they were okay last year because Illinois obviously had some NFL talent. I thought Purdue had some sneaky good talent. They had 5 NFL draft picks, Purdue did, which was the most they've had since like the early aughts of the 2000s. So, and honestly, I thought Purdue could have done better than what they actually did.
Right? They should have had a better season. They should have.
Yeah, and their schedule set them up well too. That's why that was 2 reasons why I was high on Purdue last year. I liked their roster. I thought it was some undervalued talent again, but their schedule set them up well.
Yeah, they should have beat Penn State and they should have beat Syracuse. Yeah. So those are like 2 last-second losses that they choked. But Purdue should have had even though they went to the Big Ten Championship, they should have had a better season.
Yeah, but I think the West Division is going to be a little down this year, and so it would not shock me. Illinois got pretty good offense, and they got a really good defensive line. At least the starters are good. I don't love the depth, but the starters are really good. The offensive line same thing. I don't love the depth, but the starters are really good. The skill position, though, for Illinois is what I worry about. They lose their whole secondary from last year, and that had a lot to do with the success they had on defense. I mean, they were really talented in the secondary, and they played mostly the same lineup every single week. So I'm sure, with Brett Bielema, they're going to be fine, but they got a lot of quality to replace and a lot of experience. They're going to be really young back there this year. The offense for Illinois, it wasn't special last year, and I don't think it's going to be special this year. You lose Chase Brown at running back.
And they don't have Chase Brown. Yeah.
And they don't have another talent like that. It'll be by committee approach for them.
Very underrated.
The offensive line. What do you say?
Chase Brown, very underrated what he did for the offense.
Definitely, yeah. So Illinois they have a win total set at 6.5. I see a lot of people taking that over. They might hit that over. I mean, they do play in the Big Ten West. They avoid Michigan and Ohio State in their crossover division. But I think Wisconsin and Iowa are the two teams to beat. And I trust Wisconsin with their coaching staff and being a little more aggressive. So maybe they find a way to beat Iowa 20-17 with, a couple more fourth down attempts rather than Iowa trying to punt the ball. So and they're playing at Wisconsin this year for that matchup. So that'll probably matter by the end of the season. So, I think Wisconsin will find a way to get to Indianapolis from the West Division and then Michigan from the East Division. You were discussing Ohio State and Michigan a few minutes ago. My biggest question for the Buckeyes is actually not a quarterback. It's that offensive tackle. I think I wrote about this in our preview magazine. Their offensive tackles are a little scary. It's like a little bit of a scary situation for Ohio State.
Scary in a bad way, right?
Yeah, scary in a bad way. The pass blocking grades of both of their starting offensive tackles right now, the projected starting tackles, were below replacement level. Now, there's only a couple of teams on Ohio State's schedule who can take advantage of that, and I do not think that one of those teams is Notre Dame. I don't trust Notre Dame's defensive line, so I actually would still favor Ohio State in South Bend. It'll be an intriguing matchup, but I think Ohio State's probably going to win that game. But I do worry a little bit for Ohio State against Michigan, obviously, on the road, but then also Penn State. Penn State has a really good defense this year, and they're going to be able to rush the passer. So those are the only two teams that I really see threatening Ohio State, but happening to play at Michigan. Seems like Michigan has their number right now, and with all the production that Michigan has returning. And then, of course, you still have a relatively young quarterback room for Ohio State having to play at Michigan this year in Ann Arbor. And I think that could play a pretty big role in that game. So I would have to favor Michigan.
Yeah. You think Ohio State would be favored? Well, I guess it's hard to tell with Notre Dame, at least right now, because we know Sam Hartman's good, but I don't know. I mean, they took Ohio State to the wire on the road last year, so I'm just trying to think I'm sure that there's a number out for it, but that's I forgot about that game.
I mean, it'll be. I think
Ohio State's favored by 7 at Notre Dame, and there's juice to Ohio State laying 7 points.
Yeah, that's probably what I would have them favored by, about a touchdown or so. But I think Ohio State's winning that game. Obviously it'll be a really difficult environment for the Buckeyes, although Ohio State fans travel very well. But the receiving core for Ohio State against the back end of Notre Dame's defense, I like the secondary okay. The linebackers for Notre Dame kind of are what they are. They're nothing special. So I don't think Notre Dame has the athleticism to stay with Ohio State, nor do I think Notre Dame has the defensive line to take advantage of a potential weakness with Ohio State's offensive tackles. And by the way, Notre Dame's not just their edge rushers, but the middle of their defensive line could also be a weakness. And Ohio State's interior of the offensive line, they've got some pretty good run blockers. And of course, Ohio State returns their top 2 running backs, and I'm sure they're going to try to establish the ground game in a difficult environment with a young quarterback. I think they're going to be able to run the football, and the times that they throw the play action or just a drop back pass, I think they're going to have more time to throw than what they will against Penn State and Michigan. And I think they're going to be able to expose the middle of the back end of Notre Dame's defense. And by the way, I think Ohio State's defense could be pretty good this year, and I don't think Notre Dame has the receivers to challenge Ohio State's defensive backs.
Okay. Yeah, because I've been curious about Notre Dame this season. They have obviously a pretty winnable schedule. They don't really play anybody other than Ohio State, USC, but
they play, USC and Clemson.
Oh, that's right. They have another game against Clemson.
They got to go to Clemson, and that's a much
at
more
Clemson.
environment.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Big Ten. So the next is Conference USA. Who do you have winning the Conference USA?
Western Kentucky.
Western Kentucky. I mean, they probably have the best team in the conference. So top quarterback, what's his name? Austin
Reed, I think.
Austin Reed. Okay, yeah. So he's back, and they should have a pretty powerful offense again this season.
Yeah, and they have one of the better receivers probably in the entire country, at least by volume. And Malachi Storley, I think is his last name. I'll look it up briefly.
Storley.
So Conference USA, it's going to be probably the worst conference.
It's pretty rough. It's a little rough.
Yeah, and because of that, I think you could see a couple of teams who only had a few wins last year actually at least challenge for a bowl game, if not get to a bowl game this year. One of those teams is Louisiana Tech, I think, and I actually just posted about it on my CFE page a few hours ago, earlier today. I think Louisiana Tech will actually get to a bowl game. They'll have a really good offense, and they play Western Kentucky at home this year. So that'll be a little bit of an interesting matchup. So if you can find plus odds of Louisiana Tech getting to a bowl game, I think that would be beneficial. Because they play FIU, Northwestern State, UNT at home. They play at UTEP, it's winnable. Western Kentucky at home, it's winnable. At Middle Tennessee, it's winnable. New Mexico State, Sam Houston, Jacksonville State, those are all winnable games for them. So I think La Tech will find a way to get to a bowl game. I think that will be a storyline.
Their defense is what the problem is.
Yeah. And it's probably going to be bad again. But the middle of Conference USA this year, I think, could be interesting because I think because of the conference realignment, I think the teams who were okay in the previous Conference USA, I think they could have significant win improvement in the new look Conference USA. But I would trust Western Kentucky and maybe Liberty with their schedule. Liberty has one of the more manageable schedules in the country this year as well. I would trust those two teams to have a path to get to the Conference USA championship with Western Kentucky winning.
And what about the New Mexico State Aggies? They're going to be bringing back a lot of talent for New Mexico State, but I mean, they've got a coach, they got a quarterback. What do you think about the Aggies, New Mexico State?
And by the way, it's Malachi Corley. I don't know why.
Corley, and that's the wide receiver for Western Kentucky, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
He'll be by volume one of the best receivers in college football this year. New Mexico State, I think they'll find a way to make a bowl game.
They made one last year, didn't they?
They
right?
Did. They did. They overachieved last year.
That's right, because Jerry Kill got like a tattoo of I think like the New Mexico State logo, something like that. I think that's what happened. I remember that happening. So they went to a bowl game.
Yeah, and I like their schedule. They play UMass, Western Illinois, FIU, Sam Houston, and Jacksonville State all at home this year. So I would imagine they would win at least 4 of those games, if not 5, and then get to a bowl game.
Yeah.
Have an outside chance of actually finishing with a winning record this year. So again, that middle of the pack of Conference USA, I think you're going to have a couple of teams hit the overs in their win total this year because of the downplay of CUSA this year.
And what about who I have written down as my Conference USA champion, the UTEP Miners from El Paso?
Oh, that's who you have penciled in to win conference?
That's who I have penciled in. It was between them or New Mexico. New Mexico State. I like Sonny Cumbie and Louisiana Tech, but that defense is rough. Yeah, I have UTEP penciled in. I think Hardison had a pretty. He was really good 2 years ago. Last year he was pretty terrible. But I think he bounces back this season, and a little bit of seniority on the defense, and I think UTEP could make some noise this season for Conference USA.
I agree with you. I actually think they'll make a little bit of noise nationally. I had a post about a week ago on my college football page, and the post discussed the top G5 over Power 5 matchups that I was looking at for this fall. And one of those matchups that I had, one of my most confident G5 over Power 5 matchups was UTEP over Northwestern.
Love it, yeah.
I think UTEP's winning that game.
So they'll be a tougher team.
Say that again?
Yeah, I think they'll be the tougher team, and I think they'll have the better quarterback as well.
Yep. And I think they've got the better receiving core and at least one of the best receivers that's not really getting talked about a ton with Smith, who originally transferred to Texas A&M, and then now he's back at UTEP. So
Tyron Smith from Cibolo Steel, yes sir.
Yeah, he's really good. He is going to be drafted next April, I would have to imagine.
Yeah, UTEP was stacked at wide receiver. That was until... Oh, shoot, I went blank. He transferred to Arizona. Jacob Cowan transferred to Arizona. And that had a little bit to do with why Garrett Hardison was so good 2 years ago. But I think maybe he'll have a groove after what happened last season. I'm pretty high on UTEP. And they have a favorable schedule. Like you said, they played Northwestern. They start the season off at Jacksonville State. We'll see what Jacksonville State has in that game to see what they're bringing this season. And then they play in Cardinal Ward, which it could or couldn't be a tough game, but they play in El Paso, so that's going to help UTEP. And then at Northwestern, at U of A, which Arizona should win that game, but you never know. And then they play at home against UNLV. That might be a tough game, but UNLV struggles on the road. And then they have Louisiana Tech at home. It's a favorable schedule. To me, I think that's a favorable schedule for UTEP and having a chance to win or play in the Conference USA Championship.
Yeah, I can see where you're going with that. November is going to be difficult for UTEP because they got to play Western Kentucky, at Middle Tennessee. They will get a bye week, though, before Middle Tennessee, and then they get Liberty at home. And they will get 2 of those 3 games at home.
Yeah, they got Western Kentucky at home. At least they have that, and they have New Mexico State at home as well, rivalry game.
Yeah. It's just tough for me to not pick Western Kentucky and Liberty as the teams playing for the Conference USA Championship, both because of the talent on the field as well as the schedules, especially Liberty's schedules. Liberty probably has the most manageable G5 schedule this year. So, and Liberty is spending a ton of money in their football program right now, on and off the field. So,
really, because they don't even have. When I was looking at stuff for the magazine, they don't even have like a team website. It's really weird. So they need to spend money on getting a team website. So if that's one thing that they spend money on, they should spend money on getting their team website fixed. I just want to go ahead and say that.
Yeah. But Liberty, to me, I think they are an intriguing team this year. And, of course, they bring in Jamie Chadwell as their head coach, and Chadwell always got a ton out of that Coastal Carolina roster, and I think he's going to get a ton out of this roster too. I mean, listen to the schedule for Liberty: Bowling Green, New Mexico State, at Buffalo, non-conference, at FIU, home against Sam Houston, at Jacksonville State, Middle Tennessee, at Western Kentucky, Louisiana Tech after a bye week, and it's at home. Old Dominion, UMass at home, and then at UTEP. So it's a pretty manageable schedule.
Yeah. Especially, they got the 2 home games, Buffalo on the road, non-conference. Yeah.
So
Other than going on the road against Western Kentucky, and they have UTEP on the road, but other than that, the rest sets up pretty well for them.
Yeah. So, but I do think UTEP's a sneaky good team, and you were not the first person that I have heard discuss UTEP in a positive light, so in a positive tone. So, yeah, I'm interested to see again all the middle of Conference USA, or what used to be the middle of Conference USA.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking forward to what those teams do this year.
Yeah, it's the same here. Okay, next conference, the Mid-American MAC Conference. Who do you have winning there?
Well, typically every year we see 2 new teams playing in the conference championship. This is just the most wild of conference races every single year, but I think this year it's going to be a little more chalk. Last year we saw Toledo and Ohio play for the MAC championship, and I think we're going to get that same matchup this year. The numbers tell you that Toledo should win the conference. They should win the conference basically every year. That's what the numbers say. So I do think that they'll find a way to play for the conference championship, because I do think Toledo's a really good team this year, but I think Ohio's a really good team, and I trust Ohio's coaching staff more than I do Toledo's. So my heart tells me Ohio's going to find a way to win the MAC. So I will say Toledo and Ohio play for the MAC championship again, but Ohio gets their revenge. Toledo won the MAC last year, and I think Ohio will find a way to win it this year.
I had the exact same thing. I have Ohio winning the MAC conference as well. I like the quarterback. I like their offense. The offense was ridiculous last season. I think they do it again. My problem with Finn for Toledo is too many turnovers. He throws too many interceptions for my liking. He's a little wild. Rourke should be a little less play. He should play a little less like a gunslinger, like Finn. That's my problem with Toledo and Finn, is just too many turnovers. So that's why I have Ohio.
And Toledo plays down to their opponent's level all of the time.
Every time.
Toledo?
Every time.
Yeah. And Toledo should be a 10-win team every year, and they go 7-5 or 8-4.
Yeah, I saw it almost on a weekly basis. In conference play with Toledo, they would go down, win by field goal. Get down, win by a touchdown, and have a pick six, bail them out. I don't know how else to say it. Too many turnovers from Finn, and they play down to the competition. There's really no other way to explain Toledo other than that. I think that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah. And again, for me, I'm going with the coaching staff in that matchup, and so I just think Ohio will find a way to win.
Yeah. No, I agree. I didn't have anything down for the Mountain West. I couldn't really. I was thinking, I was like Air Force, Boise. I know you're really high on Colorado State. So who do you have winning the Mountain West this year?
So for the Mountain West, I think Boise's probably going to win the conference. But I think Colorado State will hit the over on the win total, so we'll discuss that on another episode.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Boise's the most talented team. You know, Fresno loses a lot offensively. Last year, I thought Fresno would win the conference, and I was really high on Jake Haener. I love the offense. It was a veteran-laden offense. I like the way their schedule set up for the regular season, so I thought they can at least play for the conference championship. And I didn't think Boise was going to be all that great last year, and I still don't think they're tremendous on a national scale. But compared to the Mountain West teams this year, I like Boise. Probably at least to win the conference. But the Mountain West graded out the worst it has ever graded out in its 25 years.
It's not very. It's not very great at all. There's no top teams. Fresno State down, San Diego State down, UNLV not good, New Mexico not good. No disrespect to Air Force, but whenever Air Force is one of the best teams in the Mountain West, it's going to be a down year for the conference. That's just unfortunate, but that's how it is. Colorado State maybe coming back. Boise State, I think they're the best. And you have Nevada. They're rebuilding still. But yeah, no, I agree with you on that. That it's going to be a very down year for the Mountain West Conference.
Yeah, and honestly, it may not be as bad as it was last year because we had a ton of teams in the Mountain West that were in huge rebuilds last year. Bill Connolly does that returning production numbers. And there were 3 Mountain West teams in the bottom 5 or 6 in returning production nationally last year, and then there were some other teams that were in the triple digits in returning production. So it was a down year for the Mountain West. A lot of turnover, a lot of loss. Like the players that would have returned that were quality players, a lot of them entered the transfer portal. So it was a down year for the conference. I don't think it'll be that bad again, where you have almost half the conference bottoming out, but I do think that kind of similar to what I was discussing with Conference USA, where some teams, at least last year in the middle of the pack, could potentially break through this year. I think teams that were playing good down the stretch last year in the Mountain West, mainly Colorado State, maybe UNLV with the coaching change. I think one of those teams that was kind of like, if you have 4 tiers, Boise and Fresno were tier 1, and then tier 2 and tier 3, you just had a bunch of average or below teams, and the tier 4 they couldn't compete, like a New Mexico. The tier 2 and tier 3 teams in the Mountain West, I think you're going to see a couple of them hit their overs in the win total this year. So you have a lot of people who are taking the UNLV over. We'll see about that. They haven't made a bowl game in a while. And then you have some people taking the Colorado State over, and I think that's a good bet, at least at 4.5. But of course, we'll save that for another episode for a whole preview of the Rams there. But yeah, I think there's not really any great team in the Mountain West this year. I don't think Boise is all that special, but
the best of the worst.
Yeah. They'll probably win the conference. They're the most talented team.
Yeah. They should at least. They should, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Now, for what maybe it's last season, the Pac-12. Who do you have in the Pac-12? Winning the Pac-12?
USC.
Interesting. Okay.
I think USC and Oregon State will play for the Pac-12 championship, but I think USC will win that game. This is potentially going to be the most fun conference this year for a couple of reasons. Obviously, one I'm sure most of us can figure out. As long as you have not been living under a rock, you've probably heard the news about the Pac-12. The Pac-12 is literally going out with a bang this year, needless to say.
Yeah.
You definitely have a top half of the conference. I think, literally, you can split it in 6 and 6. You've got the top 6 teams, USC, in no particular order, I'll just name the 6 teams. USC, Oregon, Utah, Washington, Oregon State, and UCLA. And then the bottom 6, the rest of them. And I think Washington State is the best of the rest of that other group, but I don't even think Washington State's all that good this year. And I still see Colorado and Stanford finishing towards the bottom of the conference, and I think they will be the 2 worst teams in the conference this year. I'm not that high on Cal, but they did a sneaky good job in the portal, and they do get a lot of the upper echelon teams in trap games. So they get USC. Cal's off a bye, and it's like a sandwich game for USC. They get Oregon State, who will be coming off the game against Utah, and then they'll get Oregon State at home, and Oregon State will be coming off the Utah game, and Oregon State will play UCLA the week after they play at Cal. So I could see Cal maybe pulling off an upset this year, or at least covering spreads.
Mm-hmm.
So they are kind of an intriguing team.
May have the best running back in the conference.
Jaden Ott is really good. Although I think if you're looking for like odds of a Pac-12 running back finishing with 1,000 yards or close to it, I think that's going to be Damian Martinez for Oregon State.
Oregon State. Tough runner. Runs hard every play.
Yep, and the offensive line for Oregon State, I think, is one of the best in the country this year. I think it's one of the 3 best with Michigan and Georgia.
Yeah.
And I guess similar to Texas Tech, we're going to have an episode solely on Oregon State, because I can talk for like 3 days on Oregon State for this year.
All right.
Very, very interesting team to me. Kind of like UTSA. I said UTSA is kind of like in a one last ride kind of feel of a year. I think Oregon State is in a similar boat. So I think, like the Pac-12 is going to go out with a bang, I think Oregon State is going to go out with a bang this year. But more on the Beavers in another episode.
All right.
The Pac-12, USC against Oregon State for the Pac-12 championship. I like Washington. I like Washington a lot. But last year, they had the most manageable schedule in the Pac-12, which obviously helped out with their win total. They were a really good bet to hit the over last year, Washington. Now they are going to be playing the role of the hunted. Last year, Washington played the role of the hunter. No one was really expecting too much for them.
Yeah.
Now everyone's got their eyes on Washington. They have a more difficult schedule this year. They got to play look at their November schedule right now if you want to. They have to play at USC, Utah, at Oregon State, and then Washington State to finish up the season with their in-state rival. That is one of the most difficult November slates in the entire country for this year. So, and that does not include having to play Oregon earlier in the season. They got a road game against Michigan State, although I don't think Michigan State will be all that good this year.
No.
But Washington should get off to a really good start. We'll see if they can beat Oregon. They will they'll get them at home. But that November slate is just so difficult. So
yeah, that's tough.
Washington might be a better team this year, but they might have a worse record. And by worse, I don't mean they're going like 7-5 or 8-4. I think they're a 9-3 or 10-2 team, but I don't really see them being any better.
Right? You're gonna have to win some road games, something they didn't do last year.
Yeah, they somehow beat Oregon. I guess that was the game that Bo Nix kind of got injured, huh?
Yeah, and they won by what? A field goal, last second field goal, I want to say.
Yeah, and some questionable fourth quarter play calling from Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Washington, if I had to guess a record, is probably 9-3. Although I think 10-2 is a possibility, but I think 9-3 is most likely with a more difficult schedule this year. I don't love Washington's secondary. I don't love the interior of their offensive line, but I like everything else about the team. I think they're going to have one of the best passing attacks in the country, but I do worry about the red zone offense because, again, I got some question marks at the interior of their offensive line and with their running back room and the running game overall, and this is going to be a team that moves the ball very well between the 20s. But what do they do when they get inside the red zone? So, and against teams like with games at USC, Utah, and then at Oregon State with those latter two, probably going to be able to play in a phone booth this year with how Utah and Oregon State play. I do worry about those matchups from Washington, and that's if they win everything else.
Yeah.
So, I don't think Washington will live up to like dark horse playoff hype.
No, I don't think so. I think last year, if that was going to happen, it would happen last year. Can they do it? Maybe, but like you were saying, you bring up the schedule. You still got to beat Oregon at home, ASU at home. You got to go and play at USC. You get Utah at home, at Oregon State, and you get Washington State at home. But playoff, I don't know. It's possible, but I'm not that high on Michael Penix as some people are. Myself personally, not a big fan of left-handed quarterbacks, and especially he's kind of he's like a sidearm thrower. I'm not big on Washington. I thought I was big on them last year, and they disappointed. Penix threw too many interceptions. They did not win any big games last year, other than Oregon, but they kind of they just faltered at the end of the season. I expected more. So maybe they prove me wrong this year, and they'll have that opportunity. But a lot of work to do before that game against USC.
What's interesting is that depending on how, we mentioned that the first half of their schedule for this season is a lot more manageable than the back half of the schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Washington might go a whole year without losing a single ball game. They have not lost since October 8th of last year. They lost at Arizona State. And believe it or not, that Arizona State loss, it kept them out of the Pac-12 championship for sure. Depending on what happens with the USC game, the Pac-12 championship, maybe Washington wins that game or not. If they do, though, they're in the playoffs.
They haven't lost since October, the Huskies?
They lost to, that's right, Washington has not lost since October 8th last year against Arizona State.
Wow, and I think that game was like in the 60s, too.
I think it was 45-38.
Okay, it felt like the 60s. Maybe I'm thinking about the total. I think the total was like 66 or something. I remember because I had the over, and I think it lost by 1 point. If I'm remembering correctly. That sounds right. I'm pretty sure, like, that game, the total was like in the 60s, and it missed by like 1 point. I have to fact check that, but.
Well, if I remember correctly, it was 45-38, so you actually would have cashed in the over there.
Washington.
But yeah, they were an Arizona State win away from at least a Pac-12 championship appearance, if not something more than that. And it's crazy to think that that was one of Arizona State's 3 wins of the season last year. So I don't think Washington is top. I don't think they're top 10. I don't think they are. But I definitely think they'll finish as a ranked team. I just don't think they're playoff caliber.
I don't either. No. And I wasn't thinking, no. I was thinking of the Washington-Arizona game. That one, that was a crazy high-scoring game. 39-49. But that should have went over the total. What was the total? The total was 71, and that's 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, that went over the total. Maybe I'm thinking about another one, but I agree. I have Oregon winning the Pac-12.
You have Oregon, okay.
I do. The main reason why is their schedule. They get USC and Oregon State both at home, so I think that they can take care of business at home, and when their other games manageable. So I have Oregon winning the Pac-12. And that was the main reason. The schedule, the schedule sets up for Oregon. Whether or not they pull it off and finish is different. But the schedule sets up for them. They play at Washington and at Utah, but they also get 2 nice home games against USC and Oregon State.
What are your thoughts on Oregon's offensive line this year? Because I know they lose most of the group from last year.
Yeah, they did, and I guess I'm really high. Well, not really high, but high enough on Bo Nix, which if they're missing, if the offensive line doesn't pan out, then it could be a long year for him. But he could use his legs, he can move around. I mainly just like the schedule, the offensive line. We'll see how they do. We'll see how it holds up. But I think having that home game against USC and then the rivalry against Oregon State at home, I think that'll help. But they'll have to win one of the 2 road games at Washington or at Utah, which again it's going to be difficult.
think you and I can both agree on, though, for the Pac-12, there's definitely a top 5 to 6 teams.
Yeah, I mean, the Pac-12 hasn't been stacked like this since, 2005. Like, it's been a while since the Pac-12's had a conference like this. What is it? Just Stanford, Cal, and the Arizona schools. I would say that they're down. Washington State's, they're not terrible. Washington State shouldn't be terrible. It's a pretty strong conference this year, which I'm looking forward to because usually they get a bunch of standalone games at night, obviously. So hopefully the Pac-12 goes out with a bang.
Yeah, I'm hoping the best for the conference this year, and I would love to see the Pac-12 get into the playoff this year.
That'd be nice. It's been a while. What, 2017?
16 when
16.
Washington played Alabama.
Yeah, they had back-to-back. They had back-to-back years, didn't they? Oregon against Florida State, and then Washington, Alabama, or vice versa. I don't know which. I can't remember which one came first.
Oregon played Florida State in the inaugural season of the playoff in 2014. In 2015, I'm trying to think, was there a Pac-12 team that year? I don't think so. I think it was Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma.
Oh, so not a back-to-back. Okay.
Alabama, Clemson.
Because I'm pretty sure it was just those.
Michigan State.
Michigan State, okay.
And then 2016 we had Washington. So we've only had two Pac-12 teams make the playoff ever. The first year with Oregon played Ohio State in the national championship, and then Washington in 2016.
Yeah, Utah, they kind of messed that up last year, but they had a chance. Though.
Utah almost had it in 2019.
Yeah.
And speaking of Arizona State, they may have kept two Pac-12 teams out of the playoff in 2019. They beat Oregon late in the season, and had Oregon won that game, Oregon would have gone on. They still would have gone on to play in the Pac-12 championship. They would have beat Utah. They beat Utah, and they would have been in the playoff as a one-loss team. And I think they would have been in over Oklahoma, who needed to beat a third-string quarterback for Baylor in like 2 overtimes in the Big 12 championship. So I think Oregon would have been in because they would have had a decisive victory over a top 10 Utah team in the Pac-12 championship. And their only loss would have been by a last-second pass by Bo Nix in the season opener against Auburn, and again that Oregon should have won. So I think they would have been in the playoff that year. And so Arizona State beats Oregon. They keep Oregon out of the playoff. And then this past year, longer shot, but I mean it's not out of the question to think that Washington would have had an outside chance in the playoff, and Arizona State kept them out of the Pac-12 championship.
Kept them out of it,
So.
Yeah, it should be an interesting season for the Pac-12 this year. All right, second to last, the SEC. Who do you have winning the SEC this year?
Well, until someone dethrones them, I'm going to pick Georgia. But I think Georgia and LSU will face in the SEC championship this year. I do not like Bama's quarterback room. And I guess for some people, they might think that's the casual take. But there's a reason why most people have that as their take about Alabama's quarterback room being questionable. It's because it is questionable. I am never one to doubt Nick Saban. Notice when I questioned Alabama, it wasn't specific. It wasn't the team. It was their quarterback room. And LSU's quarterback room is one of the best in the country. Starts with Jaden Daniels, obviously, but their second-string quarterback, and Nussmeier, he's as good as any second-string quarterback in the entire country. So I like LSU's depth. Their receiving core is really good, better than Alabama's right now. The offensive line, they were really young last year, and they returned everyone. And they started playing really well down the stretch last year. They started 2 true freshmen at offensive tackle last year. So that's noteworthy for LSU. We're talking about a team with 2 true freshmen at offensive tackle, and they played in the SEC championship last year. I like LSU's chances to get back to Atlanta. Do you know LSU has never played in Atlanta in back-to-back years ever?
I think I heard that, but not recently. That would be tough. They would have to, or they have a chance to change that this season.
Yeah, and I think they'll find a way to get to Atlanta. I don't know how. Like I don't know if they're going to be 11-1 or better. I kind of feel like LSU's a 10-2 team, but I think they can get to Atlanta. I think the SEC West is going to be really exciting this year among LSU, Alabama. I wouldn't exclude Texas A&M from that conversation. Just because of their talent. Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin, they're a high variance team, a fun team to watch, but they're high variance.
Yeah.
And I do worry about their defense. I don't think the talent's that great. That offensively they'll do really good. I don't love the receiver room this year. Zachary Franklin's a great pickup from UTSA, but he's still stepping up in competition. And they got that transfer from Louisiana Tech who's really good as well. So Ole Miss always gets guys in the portal, and I know they're going to be fine. I just don't know if they're going to be great. And you have to be great, obviously, to compete in the SEC.
Yeah.
So, and I don't trust Jackson Dart.
No. Yeah, no, neither do I. The only person you can trust is Judkins at running back. He should be able to carry them, but you know he can only carry them so far, like we saw last year. There's plenty of games where it came down to Dart having to make first downs, come from behind, and they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it, and that's what happens. When you could have the defense, but you have to have that quarterback, because sometimes you get behind, or you need to play catch up, or you need to make a play. You got to have a good quarterback, and I don't think Jackson Dart's that player for Ole Miss.
No, I don't either. It's going to be interesting to see how many quarterbacks play significant snaps this year for the Rebels, because they got Spencer Sanders coming in from Oklahoma State, who was a turnover quarterback in Stillwater. So
he massively regressed from 2 years ago.
He wasn't even that great 2 years ago. They had a great defense that year.
Yeah, he's not special. I mean, he could run, make some plays, but is he a top tier SEC quarterback? No.
Right. So it makes Ole Miss a fun team to watch, nonetheless. I just don't think they're going to be all that great this year. And their schedule is very tricky as well. They get some of their toss-up games on the road, and they play teams who they're probably not beating anyways at home. So that's a really difficult. The way the schedule shakes out is really difficult for them. We should probably have an episode on this too, John, discussing like if you were to look at teams from an average national perspective, from the national average perspective. Teams who are kind of in the middle of the FBS in terms of power rating, if they, in respect to their average roster, have to play their toss-up games on the road, and then the games against teams that are probably not beating anyways at home, that makes it more difficult for those kinds of teams to make the postseason, while if you're an average team, and you get your toss-up games at home and the games against teams that you're probably going to lose on the road, it makes it a little bit easier to accumulate wins to get to the postseason. You know where I'm going with that?
Yeah.
So that's a tricky situation that Ole Miss has this year. I think they're getting to the postseason, but I didn't discuss this in the Pac-12 preview, but Arizona is one of those schools that has that kind of schedule where they get the toss-up games on the road, and then the games are probably not winning at home. So I know a lot of people think Arizona is going to get to a bowl game this year. I do not think they will.
It'll be tough. What about Auburn? I think Auburn, they have a decent roster. They have Hugh Freeze coming in, who's already one of the top coaches in the conference. The schedule's not terrible, but they have some tough road games at A&M, at LSU, but that's off a bye. And then you have at Arkansas. Arkansas should be down, but Arkansas at home, it's going to be tough either way. So I think, and then they have Alabama Iron Bowl at home. So I think that if we play around with what you had said about LSU not making back-to-back SEC championship games, if that trend continues, maybe Auburn sneaks in there if they could beat Alabama. They still have to get their quarterback situated. They're going to have Peyton Thorne from Michigan State. That's not ideal, but I mean, with Hugh Freeze, I think anything's possible for Thorne. So you never know. But I think Auburn could be that sneaky team that if they could, beat A&M and beat Arkansas, then there's a chance that they could sneak in the SEC championship. It wouldn't be the first time they have done it either.
Yeah, it's like whenever you don't have high expectations for Auburn is when you should, and then vice versa.
Yeah, exactly.
They're a high variance team to say the least. I do agree with you that I think Auburn could be sneaky good this year. In fact, I actually think they're going to finish with a winning regular season record. But I don't see them getting to Atlanta. I think it's kind of LSU and Alabama.
Should be, yeah.
Yeah, I think they're the top two teams in the West, and I think it's a little bit of a drop-off after that. But, again, you can't necessarily discount Texas A&M because of their talent, but we'll see we'll see if they actually get the most out of that talent this year.
They haven't done it yet. We'll see.
Right. But, yeah, I think LSU and Alabama are the teams to beat. But I do agree with you. I think Auburn is sneaky good. And like you mentioned, they do get a couple of those toss-up games at home, which is probably going to matter at the end of the regular season in terms of their win total.
Yeah.
They have a very manageable non-conference. It's one of the easiest non-conference plays in the country for Power 5 teams. I expect Auburn, at the very least, to get back to a bowl game, and I think they'll finish with a winning record. I could see actually 7-5, maybe even challenging for 8-4.
Yeah. I mean, they pulled Georgia this year, so they played Georgia. But let's see here. Yeah, Georgia's who they play from the other division. I don't know. I mean, they can, like you said, they have they start off the season with 3 easy games, and then they go to College Station, and then that's when we'll figure out what both teams are really about, A&M and Auburn, and then that's going to open and set up the road for whoever wins that game. It's basically an elimination game, so we'll see what happens. But that we'll know week 4 when somebody gets kicked off the SEC mountain for sure.
Yeah, and for Auburn this year, there's a few games where I don't really see them winning. Georgia at LSU, I don't think they're going to beat Alabama, but I'll say this. Do not ever count, well, it's a rivalry for one, obviously, but do not ever think that Auburn, especially when they're playing at home, cannot beat Alabama. I'll go over the last 10 years that when Auburn has played at home against Bama. In 2013, the kick 6. In 2015, an Alabama team that would go on to win the national championship against an Auburn team that totally fell on their face that year. Like, they didn't even come close to living up to expectation that year.
Mm-hmm.
That game was like 12-6 late in the third quarter, and then I think Alabama ended up winning by like 2 scores, but it was close the whole way through. It was a tight game. 2017, Auburn beat Alabama by 2 touchdowns. 2019, Auburn beat Alabama. And then in 2021, when Auburn was barely qualifying for a bowl game against an Alabama team that ended up playing in the national championship and almost winning it, and probably would have if it not been for injuries to the receiver room. Remember, that's the game that went to 4 overtimes, and Alabama had to have that late drive in the fourth quarter to tie it. So those games are always tight in the playing. So it's based on history. I'm gonna think it's going to be close again.
Yeah. I mean, lesser Auburn teams have beaten better Alabama teams. That's for sure. So it's definitely in play. I think so.
Yeah, and when they go to Tuscaloosa, it's not normally as close. But yeah,
No.
at Auburn and the Plains, always interesting, and I can see it being tight once again.
Yeah. No, I agree. Let's see here.
Auburn did a really good job, by the way, with their portal class, especially on the offensive line. Like they got some dudes at the offensive line. They got a center. I had that post about them a couple of weeks ago as an overlooked position group. They got Avery Jones from East Carolina. He was one of the best centers in all of college football last year.
Mm-hmm.
They got Dylan Wade, an offensive tackle at Tulsa. He's really good, and he's going to be the starting left tackle for Auburn. They got Jaden Muskrat, another offensive tackle from Tulsa last year.
Yeah, that's right. The Auburn's the one who got both of those linemen from Tulsa. Because that's right. Because Phil Montgomery's the OC. Yeah.
Yeah, and Muskrat will be a backup offensive guard for Auburn this year. So they did, and then they also got a really good offensive tackle from Western Kentucky, who was top 5 in the country in least amount of pressures allowed last year in the G5. So yeah, I know he's stepping up in competition, but like they got some dudes in the portal on the offensive line. They got Jair Shorter from UNT as well, a receiver.
Yeah, they're gonna need him. That's for sure. And like I said, I think Auburn will have a good season. I would pick them before I pick like A&M or an Arkansas. That's for sure. So yeah, we'll see. Like I said, I'm looking forward to that Auburn A&M game. If Auburn can win the game on the road, then that sets them up for success. If A&M can win, that keeps them alive for another couple of weeks. So it should be a good game. Let's see here.
If there are any like odds for Auburn to like get back to a bowl game, because I'm sure you're probably still going to have some that project them to go 5-7 with the first year coach. They are finishing at least 6-6, even if they disappoint. Because I think Auburn's good enough to finish with a winning regular season record. So if there is anyone projecting them to be 5-7, I think they're a little off on that.
All right, yeah. So Auburn to win the West Division, 35-1. That's not bad. I mean, is it likely? Maybe not. But if you were going to throw some darts, that's not a terrible future to have. But it's not going to be easy. That's for sure.
No, and I would not project them to win the West Division, but I think they can still. I mean, what's their win total set at? Is it like 6.5, maybe 7?
I don't remember what it was. I remember it being juiced to the over. 6.5 minus $1.40. So yeah.
I mean, that's not like too.
That's not too bad. Yeah.
If it was like -155 or 160, I wouldn't take it. But you said it's -140.
Minus 140. Yeah.
And I
think that's. And when I was looking at it earlier, not earlier, but I guess like whenever we were doing the preview magazine, they have to win 1 or 2 road games. They gotta win 1 of 4 games. I think it was like LSU, A&M, Arkansas, Alabama. They got to win 2 out of those 4 to realistically hit that, if I'm remembering correctly, which is doable. But if I'm remembering correctly how their schedule lines up, I think that's how it goes.
Well, if they hit the over on 6.5, so they finish 7-5, let's say, for example, they would go undefeated in the non-conference. I think they play at Vanderbilt, so they would win that. They would split the games, so that's 5 wins, and then split the games against Arkansas and Ole Miss and win something else, or beat both Arkansas and Ole Miss.
Yeah. And they still play New Mexico State at the end of the season, too.
Yeah, so go 4-0 in the non-conference.
And win 3 SEC games.
So, yeah.
Yeah, Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, and then one of, those other games that we talked about.
Oh, they play Mississippi State at home, don't they?
Yep. That's a home game.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they can hit that over, actually.
Yeah, so do I. I think it's very, very doable. All right, last but not least, the Sun Belt Conference. Who do you have winning the Sun Belt?
If anyone listening to this episode, if y'all are a betting person with college football, I would bet South Alabama to win the Sun Belt this year. I think they're the best team in the conference. South Alabama was a 10-2 team last year in the regular season, lost to Western Kentucky in the bowl game. But they were 4 points away from playing in the Sun Belt Championship last year and probably would have beat Coastal Carolina. South Alabama is good. Like they got some dudes, especially in the secondary on defense. But Carter Bradley is back at quarterback. He's a senior. This is a senior-laden team this year. They got the running back, who was one of the better running backs in the Sun Belt last year. He's a senior. Their second-string quarterback used to be the starting quarterback, Desmond Trotter. He's a senior. So, if you were into, again, betting futures, I think this is a good bet for them to win the Sun Belt at that plus. I want to say it's 300 something. I forgot.
What? It's plus money, really?
I think so. If you can, let me find it right now.
Let's see here. Futures, conference winner, Sun Belt. Yeah. South Alabama plus 290. That's not bad.
290.
Yeah, that's not bad at all.
I think they're the best team in the Sun Belt this year. They will have to play at James Madison and at Troy. But remember, James Madison is still not eligible for the postseason. So that wouldn't affect South Alabama if they lost to James Madison, because that's not going to do James Madison any good for a win there. But it would hurt South Alabama if they lost that game and lost to Troy on the road. Here's the thing, though. I think South Alabama is going to go on the road and beat Troy. Troy lost a lot from last year's team.
Yeah.
And Troy only beat South Alabama by 4 points last year. And South Alabama, I think, is going to even be better than what they were last year. And I don't think Troy will be as good as what they were last year. So, this South Alabama team, I think, will be one of the best G5 teams in the country this year. Again, like I said, this is a senior-laden team. So it's Carter Bradley, the starting quarterback for the Jaguars. If he goes down with an injury, it's okay. You can have Desmond Trotter come in. So if you're worried about the injury thing there, don't worry about that too. They've got depth.
Yeah, they got depth. Yep.
Yep. So I think this is a pretty decent bet, actually.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have guessed that number would have been 2.9 plus 300. So that's not bad. That's not bad. And I think I too think that they have the best team in the Sun Belt. For all the reasons that you pointed out, I think that last year they snuck up on people, but this year I think they'll, they have that experience, and I think they should be able to get to where they want to go, which is Sun Belt Championship.
Yep, and I think we will also have a little bit of content on South Alabama in a future video about win totals as well.
Yeah, we will. This will not be the last time we speak about South Alabama Jaguars, that's for sure.
But in terms of who they're going to be playing, maybe Coastal, but I would watch out for Georgia Southern this year. I think they're going to be good. You got Clay Helton coming back for a second year as head coach.
Mm-hmm.
So you got a lot of guys who decided to come back for one more year for them. Defensively, though, it's a brand-new look defense, but it's a team that's relying on a lot of experience through the portal. So it's not like you're getting a bunch of freshmen and sophomores out there. They were bad defensively last year, so it's a very low bar to clear, but the expectation is not very high for their defense. But offensively, they're going to be really good. They nailed a transfer quarterback last year in Kyle Van Treese from Buffalo, and they nailed another G5 transfer quarterback in Davis Brin from Tulsa. I think Davis Brin is going to be, by volume, one of the 10 best passers in college football this year. I should say he's going to be in the top 10 in passing yards.
He was last year. I think he was in the top 3, if not first place.
Yeah, before he got hurt. He got hurt, I think, halfway through the season last year, I want to say.
Yeah, he was definitely up there.
Yep, and he's got a really good offensive line blocking in front of him. that only I think gave up like 10 sacks last year for Georgia Southern. So they were a really effective offensive line. They returned again most of their guys up front, and receiving corps loaded this year. I think this team's and they played Coastal at home, and Coastal's defense is going to be a question, just like Georgia Southern's defense. So it should be a fun game, just like it was last year. It came down to the wire at Coastal last year, and I think it'll come down to the wire in Georgia Southern this year. So watch out for the Eagles for this season.
Yeah.
Sun Belt East Division. But I know you have. I guess we'll discuss another win total bet in the Sun Belt this year with a team from Texas.
Yeah, the Texas State Bobcats bringing in head coach G.J. Kinney from Incarnate Word. They should have a pretty veteran team as well, and I think that'll help him. But he also brought in a few players, and I don't have it in front of me what their win total is. I think it was 4.5 wins, and yeah, we have that over. We'll talk about that in another video. But yeah, I think Texas State. There's a couple of teams that should be down this year, like Louisiana Monroe, that I think they could steal some wins and get over that win total.
Yeah, I could totally see that, and I'm not sold on Southern Miss this year either. I know they got Frank Gore Jr. at running back. He is really good. I don't really trust really much of the rest of Southern Miss. They had a pretty good team last year, and they went 6-6 in the regular season. And Southern Miss has a really difficult schedule this year, so it would not shock me to see them actually miss out on a bowl game. And Texas State, I think they could sneak into a bowl game this year. So I'm with you there. I think
it's in play, yeah.
It could be a sneaky good team this year. I don't know if they're gonna go 8-4, 9-3, but I think they'll be sneaky good.
Yeah, no, I don't know about 9. I don't know about 9 wins, but I mean they have the potential to. If that would be like a really good season, obviously. But I think like a 5 or 6 win season, definitely a win for the Bobcats this season.
Yeah, and I think ULL, Louisiana Lafayette, they lost some quality players in the portal, and they weren't really bringing back a lot to begin with. So
they overachieved last year for sure.
Yeah, and like they regressed from 2021, obviously losing Billy Napier, and they lost a lot of that production from that team. That was a super senior laden team. They obviously regressed last year, but I thought they were they lost some close games last year, so I thought their record was about as indicative of what they really were, about a 500 team. But I think it'll be an uphill battle for ULL to make a bowl game this year. So it wouldn't shock me to see maybe Texas State be that team that's projected towards the bottom of the West Division, actually sneak up and finish kind of in the middle of that division.
Yeah, that's at least what I'm banking on, and I think it'll play out that way.
Yep, and I think that's a good take, because I think they're a little undervalued right now, just based on relying on a lot of portal players, but those are some immediate contributors for them. And then again, you look at the rest of the West Division of the Sun Belt outside of South Alabama and Troy. It's kind of lacking quality teams. So yeah, I think Texas State could take advantage of that.
Yeah, no, I agree, and like we said, some of those Louisiana schools they're going to be down compared to what they were last year. So there's there's an avenue for Texas State to steal some wins this season, and at least get that 5th win, and also get that 6th win to get into a bowl game.
Yeah, that'd be an awesome story too.
Yeah, I agree with G.J. Kinney, and I think that's something they could do. At least, that's what I'm hoping for. And that was the last one. I guess we'll close up the first episode on that with the Sun Belt. We got everyone in, all the conference champions, some other additional talks, some extra info on some other teams, but I would say that's a pretty solid first episode, Connor.
Well, I know we've been looking forward to doing this now for a good month or two since we've been discussing this. It was certainly an awesome starting point for us with this with Desert Dwellers Sports Network, and we are only on the come up. We have the best preview magazine out there.
That's right. Yeah.
And we're going to have the best podcast and YouTube channel out there as well.
Yeah, yes, sir. You know it. And for those of you following or listening, we have the preview magazine free on our website. You can go check it out on our homepage. You could download it, look it over. You should be able to download it onto your computer, anything like that. But yeah, go ahead and check it out, and we'll be pumping out as much college football content and then NFL once that starts. But for the channel as a whole, but Connor and I will mainly be focused on college football. And putting out as much and talking about as much as we can to get y'all all the information that you need. But with that being said, I think we'll go ahead and close it up there, Connor. And it took us a while with all the technical difficulties, but we finally got it situated, and I think it came out pretty good for the first time. And then I got some text messages that it was working pretty well on the live feed on YouTube, so we should be good. And then we'll get it posted, so whoever else that missed it live can check it out too.
Awesome. Well, we went through our own technical difficulties, right? We had to face our own kind of adversity, just like
yeah, exactly. But all right, well, I'll go ahead and shut it down there, and we'll do this again soon.
All right, looking forward to it.
All right, take it easy, Connor. We'll go ahead and close it up there. We'll see y'all.